So, welcome back. I hope you had already a great lunch. So, question first, are we still awake? Yeah. Are we still awake? That's what I'm talking about. So, we're going to continue with something that hasn't been part of DEVit's format for the past few years, and that is actually a discussion panel. My name is Thanos, and without further ado, please welcome on stage Dave Platt, Cheryl Platz, and Joe Sepi.
Hey guys, how's everybody?
So welcome to Greece again.
Thank you.
Thank you, it's great to be here. I love
So
Greece.
as you know, Greece is the birthplace of Greek tragedy, right? Which is
Yes.
a form of theater play. And we thought today that we should revive that kind of ancient tradition in the form of those furnitures.
Well done.
But we do have a nice settee over here with a chandelier. And we actually kind of talked with Sia so she could come and swing on that thing or whatever she does.
Right here.
Yeah, but the guys from the theater didn't actually quite like that, so we had to cancel
Well, if you have
that.
the wig, I'll wear it.
And it's the union rules, you know?
Yep, the union rules, exactly. So I think I'm gonna have, so today we're gonna be discussing about online privacy or privacy in the online world. And I think I'm gonna have Cheryl start us off. So do you think that privacy will be a competitive differentiator in the years to come? And to put it in more simple words, do you think that consumers will be actually deciding whether to purchase a product or a service solely on the idea that they have for that company and how that company will handle their personal data?
I certainly think it will come into play when you're comparing multiple products in the same spectrum. You know, I mentioned earlier in my talk working on the Echo Look, which is a camera plus Alexa. It's a fashion photography device. And there's inherent privacy concerns there. That was one of our tough questions. Why would someone want to allow a camera into their closet or bedroom? It doesn't come naturally. But when we started talking to customers, it was interesting. If you're solving a strong enough problem, the relationship with privacy changes. And I'm not sure what that means for customers. Is that good? Is it bad? The fact that when we started to talk to people, eventually they were like, I want this so much I don't actually care as much. I trust Amazon enough. It's going to be interesting. I think that we may find a point where customers get complacent, and we'll have to start asking ourselves these tough questions. Is just because customers are comfortable, should we be comfortable? Or do we need to see a few steps forward and protect folks when they're not asking us to?
And that sort of cycle's already going, right? I mean, you know, people were happy to sign up for Gmail because it's a great product and, you know, not think about all the privacy concerns. So I think it comes in circles.
David?
Well, I'm thinking that the so-called privacy concerns are actually a marketing opportunity. You know, I could use Hotmail and see generic ads that I don't care about. On the other hand, if I'm on Gmail and I'm having a conversation with somebody about painful hemorrhoids, right? And an ad comes up for a new remedy, oh yeah, lidocaine in it, for example, I might be very grateful. And it won't happen there.
Okay, so David, do you think that in order for that to happen, right, a company puts like significant effort in the back end, collecting, categorizing, sorting, analyzing all sorts of personal data from users. Do you think that actually entitles them to ownership of that data?
Well, you know, they put a lot of time and effort into it. I mean, how can Google show us traffic where it's red and green and yellow if they don't keep track of where everybody is and how fast they're going? The thing is, users don't really give a damn. Yeah, let me tell you, how many people here, suppose the government were to say, every single one of you has got to wear a tracker on your ankle so we can tell exactly where you are at all times. What would you do to them? You would storm the parliament with torches and pitchforks, right? Now, suppose they say, well, all right, you can carry it in your pocket and we'll send you pictures of cats. Who here does not have a cell phone in their pocket right now? Okay, one person. So you really do not give a damn about privacy. You say that you do with your words, but with your actions, you really don't, and you never will. Okay? Right.
Joe, what's your take on this?
You know, it's interesting, and there's all sorts of levels to it. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying. On the other hand, my wife has never used Facebook. She doesn't do any of that stuff. So she's kind of off the grid, if you will.
Mine too, for now.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't know. People walk around with their preferences right on their shirt, too. You know, it's kind of all in the culture, I think.
Cheryl, what's your take on this?
Well, I think it tells us a lot that, I don't know if you folks have seen this, but after the Cambridge Analytica problems with Facebook, I saw a non-trivial number of my friends say, guys, I'm signing out of Facebook, catch me on Instagram. They're owned by the same company. Okay. And one other thing that I think is, so yes, we are emotional creatures, and we're not necessarily making our decisions based on policy, but I do think there's a newer generation who's being raised in this climate, and I sometimes teach workshops to get like girls interested in computer science, and it's interesting to hear how they think about privacy and security. They're deeply concerned about it, and they're developing different sort of mental models. And so I think as the generation who's been bathed in the Cambridge Analytica problems grows up, we may see a different form of decision making that we haven't seen yet, because it's stressing those kids out.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so there's no doubt that, you know, by collecting all this personal data and just, you know, juggling them in interesting ways, you can come up with pretty useful technologies. So do you think there's actually, do you have any idea for maybe current or maybe future legislators on how to protect people's data without actually impeding that innovation? Like, what would you do if you were a regulator? Tough question, I know, but... It
is an interesting question. The closest analog I can draw is in voice technology today and natural language processing. It takes a ton of data to build a functioning natural language model. And each company who runs a natural language model is essentially assembling a ton of customer data and profiting from it. And you're seeing companies like Mozilla step up now and say, well, maybe we can create a centralized repository that people opt into, that's not tied to profit. And that, to me, seems like an interesting way to move forward, like is to allow customers who are willing to share to a greater good contribute data to a model, but divorce it a little bit from individual companies who are making profit-based decisions.
Joe, can you play legislator?
Yeah, I mean, IBM's involved in the Center for Open Data and AI Technologies, I think it is. That's, you know, perhaps similar. But I think, I mean, from a legislative perspective, first of all, I don't think that that's, you know, the answer for sure, but I think it could help. And I think about in the US for the Consumer Financial Bureau, they tried to implement some standards around simplified language for consumer products, financial products, and perhaps something along those lines for internet privacy and your data, as well as you know, the controls available to you as well. I think that could help.
If you put something out to the legislature, first of all, they're all idiots, are they not? And so what are they going to vote for? I will tell you what they're going to vote for. They are going to vote for whichever corporation gives them more money. All right? Am I wrong? All right? So, you know, thinking that the legislature is going to save you, is going to create a privacy environment that is one that you want, is like believing in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. It is a convenient fiction that allows you to get on with your life without working for it. You know, I mean, you've all been in denial that you've been tracked for your entire moves have been tracked for the last 10 years. Why leave it now?
Cool. So the next one is pretty interesting, I believe. So we have some companies, right, that are currently putting significant effort into strengthening the system, using proprietary encryption technology, and basically coming up with a bunch of ways for hardening systems and make it difficult to break or, you know, sniff around. On the other hand, though, we have law enforcement agencies and we have governments that actually fight back those companies, and they say, you know, we have terrorism, you need to make those kind of breakable, we need to have the keys to the encryption, you know, all that sorts of thing. And Apple did that a while back with the iPhones. So do you think that at some point someone will prevail, and who? Will that be the law enforcement or the encryption companies?
I foresee an eternal battle, like between Zeus and the Titans. You know, they're constantly battling back and forth and back and forth. And sometimes it'll go a little bit to this side and sometimes a little bit to that side. It is that eternal battle that keeps life interesting. Do I foresee one side vanquishing the other? No time soon.
Yes, but they both do have actual points from an ethical standpoint, right?
They all have ethical points. That's why they'll keep fighting.
Cheryl, what do you think?
To some extent, I agree. I think that there will be localized wins. Like, I think we're going to see a stratification. Some countries will choose one model and some countries will choose another, much like we have some countries who are more socialist or communist and some countries who are more capitalist. And we may be able to see in microcosm what works better. But in the end, you mentioned kind of like an illusion, right? The Easter bunny that helps you get to sleep at night. In the end, no matter how good the encryption is, the human factor is always the problem. Like the Equifax hack in the United States was not really so much, I mean, it was poor security standards. We could choose to go hardened and no back doors, but we ultimately, employees, are the ones who are vanquishing everything at the end of the day, ruining all of that hard work.
As Bruce Schneier likes to say, if you think encryption is the solution, you don't understand the problem.
Joe, do you agree with that one?
I agree fully, yes.
Okay, all right. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. So there are users using online services, I don't know, Gmail, Facebook, and all the rest, so they use them for free, right? The companies provide them for free, but kind of implies an exchange of their personal data. And right now, they're basically, most of them seem to be okay with that one. But do you think that in the future, consumers will start, putting up a higher price tag on their personal data, so to speak?
I may be overly optimistic, but I hope so. And I think about, my progression through the world of the internet. In the early days, I was happy to download music from Napster and whatnot. But now I'm happy to pay, a music company to let me listen to music and, hopefully pay the artists a fair share. So I used to work at the New York Times, and when they instituted the paywall, everybody said, "Oh, that's the end of the New York Times," and that didn't turn out to be the case. We actually did fairly well after the paywall. So I'm hopeful, but humans disappoint pretty often, so we'll see.
DEVit, will you still be keen to, provide personal data for hemorrhoid treatment?
I really don't give a flying fish. If anybody wants to see my hemorrhoid, I posted pictures, just for the sheer pain of it. Anybody really give a damn? You don't. If you're depending on users to think, you are going to be disappointed. All right? As to your music thing, well, it was the music companies finally getting wise and saying, you know what, we can license this and make some money, or we can have it stolen and have no money. And when Spotify or whoever came up with something that is better than Napster was, that is for only $10 a month, which is a couple of cups of coffee, and I have anything anywhere. I went to Eleftheria, what's her, Anathanakis, what's her name?
Forget about my name.
Anyway, a really good Greek singing lady at the Forest Theater last Wednesday. She was absolutely fabulous. And now I can go home and I can listen to her on Spotify. And they came up with something that was better. They gave me a better service for a price I was willing to pay. And that is what's going to dominate, that you give customers what they want for a price they're willing to pay. And privacy, I really don't care if they know that I'm listening to this one rather than that one.
Okay.
The thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that even if customers do think and do restrict or do try to make ethical choices, license agreements are almost unnavigable. Like, we can't actually see what you're giving up. And even if you do think that you've restricted a company from your personal data or you think you've chosen ethically, we don't know what we don't know, and people can still track even when we told them not to. There was, I think I remember saying a few months ago that even when people told their Android phones not to track them, Google was still able to triangulate their location using other means. And so you're like, well, what's the point of choosing one way or the other? Like, trust is an illusion. It's tough. You can never guarantee that companies are going to act ethically. It's all just a value judgment.
Yeah, and I think it can get blurry too in the sense that, like, people can put the highest level of privacy on their Facebook, feed or what have you, but that isn't the same as Facebook tracking you.
Right.
I was texting my wife a few months ago, this before, all this recent hullabaloo, and I was texting her about getting some dessert or something, and I hadn't even sent the text yet, and I jumped over to Facebook from some alert, and at the top was a little ad about looking for dessert spots, and I was like, holy cow.
Well, weren't you glad to have that? To try and find a good place to get
No, I wanted her to
desserts?
pick something up at the store. So,
I don't know, you were out.
It freaked me out, and I'll admit I deleted it all, Instagram as well. So that's crazy. I don't
Well,
know that.
basically they're the same thing now, so
Yeah,
no
yeah.
wonder why.
Yeah.
So Cheryl mentioned license agreement, right? So I have a secret to share with you right now and with the whole audience. Nobody reads them,
I don't.
right?
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah. So here's a really fun fact. So researchers have actually estimated that it would take 72 hours compound for a year for all the license agreements that you see every day here and there on the internet to actually read them and understand them.
I can't imagine it's that low.
It seems low.
So do you think that these legalese mumbo jumbo will be sufficient in years to come as a cover, quote unquote, for the companies to be able to do sneaky things based on the fact that basically nobody reads them?
They will do the same thing in the future as they've done today and as they've done in the past. They all boil down to, I'll save you 72 hours. They all say, we do what the hell we want, and if you don't like it, tough. Am I wrong?
No,
So-
certainly not. Cheryl, what do you think?
This is one of the few cases where I trust the Twitter mob in a way. I don't think people are, I think that in general, the EULAs are enough to hide some sort of nefarious intent from time to time, and sometimes it's just lawyers covering their rear ends. But, there was a social network in the United States that launched Vero, and within, it hit viral point. A ton of people, hundreds of thousands of people downloaded it, and suddenly somebody on Twitter pointed out that part of their EULA allowed them to repost any images you posted without any compensation, and the people who were drawn to that platform had been artists because they were disillusioned with Instagram. And so while everyone didn't necessarily take the 72 hours it might have taken to sort through that, there was someone out there looking for it, and it caused changes in their policies, and it actually kind of might have hurt them permanently because the few people who were their advocates backed off. But
What was
we
that
could
place called again?
crowdsource that.
What was the platform?
Vero.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Yeah, right?
Have you ever thought, as a UX researcher, how maybe you could sort of improve that experience that people have to go through?
We
So
want
that,
to.
that dreadful part where they have to kind of understand what the company is dealing with, how it's dealing with your personal data, and maybe how to improve it.
Yeah, we often wish we could make it better, and I've seen companies that do make it better. The more lawyers you have at a company, the less likely you are to be able to affect that change.
Well, why can't we implement some AI and NLP to process all of that and have some technology to, parse all that legalese and break it down for us? I challenge you all to take up that.
I just told you,
Yeah.
man. What are you wasting your time with?
Because basically somebody will start bribing the AI,
Yeah.
right?
I actually have the solution to all of this. And it's very,
I'd
very.
love to hear that.
It's not only simple, it's a lot of fun too. Right?
Okay.
And that is deliberate obfuscation. You don't have to just knock everybody out, just obfuscate your data enough so that it's no longer cost effective. I went to, it tells you how long ago it was, my daughter's about to turn 18, I went to buy diapers, I guess it was some years ago, and they asked me for my zip code. All right, and rather than tell them to go screw, I was in Boston, I gave them a zip code from California. All right? And so if we all did that, if we all just lie to when somebody asks you, when somebody calls me for a political opinion, I don't tell them to get off. I lie to them deliberately and with malice aforethought. And I enjoy it too. And if enough people did that, then, come the next election, we would have the funniest night of political comedy since Henry Kissinger got the Nobel Peace Prize. So all we have to do is to switch our data around somehow, like these affinity cards that keep track of what you buy at this store or that store. Swap them with your neighbor. And okay, well, he's buying Pampers and bean sprouts and red wine today, and then next week he's buying cigarettes and empty pens and
Make
white
tracking
wine.
unprofitable.
Yes, just all you have to do is muddy the waters enough that it's no longer cost effective. Swap SIMs, phone SIMs with your friends. It'll be great.
I will say that on the subject of EULAs, Creative Commons has been really interesting, standardizing essentially what is a set of legal terms for sharing. I don't know if that's possible for apps or software, but it might be worth looking into. Not every company will opt in because they want to protect themselves, but maybe there's a way we as an industry can standardize, EULA Commons, and by adopting a certain set of criteria, you know what you're getting into.
The New York Times this morning, I went to read it and I got the GDPR notice, and click OK to let us in. I wish I could project it here, but it said, click on OK to allow this, or click on the little X at the upper right-hand corner, the one that you think you're dismissing it. That also constitutes your agreement. So,
Okay.
Yeah, that one's up there. I wish I could project it here.
This is what they call the dark part.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So
Your old buddies.
Yeah, I know, right? I'll give them a call.
there's something that's actually called the privacy paradox. God, I love paradoxes. So what basically is the privacy paradox is the phenomenon, right, bear with me, in which online users actually state that they are very, very, very concerned about their privacy online, but at the end of the day, they just act like if they don't care at all.
Just like these guys here. Just like everybody else in the universe who says one thing with their mouths and another thing with their actions.
So, which
and so do I.
brings up the very interesting question of, do you think that this is actually a training problem or an educational problem?
Bite your tongue. People say, well, we'll have a bad user interface. Okay, we'll just educate our users. Bullshit, you won't. Right?
No,
human beings are human, and they will not become anything other than human anytime soon.
Yeah, let me put it in because that's actually more specific. By education, I don't mean that the company gets to educate the user, but you as a parent goes to your daughter and you actually educate her when she's young what sort of online privacy pitfalls she should avoid.
I've been telling her since she's 5, they do what the hell they want, and if you don't like it, tough.
Okay.
Joe? Said, yeah, and I don't give a damn.
Joe?
Right.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I have a young child. I won't even use the gender so you don't get too much information about me. And we tell him, we talk to him about it, and we don't let him use any services that have any social activities. And I mean, he's at that age where he's not really doing that yet, but some of his friends are. Mm-hmm. But we just kind of keep that all off limits. I don't post. I post very little about him online, if any at all. And so I don't know. I'm hoping that we're kind of instilling that in him, that there's something to be concerned about there, and he'll take it from there.
Got it, Cheryl?
We're not really offering people much of an alternative. Essentially, privacy is being portrayed by companies as a tax.
That's right.
Or a blocker to getting value. And, I think that if you're faced between having something or having nothing, you're going to choose the something even if there's cost to you. So, I mean, the ethical way to move forward would be to convey the actual harm that sharing your data could have, but very few companies are motivated to do that sharing. And so some of it is wise parents kind of helping their kids understand that potential damage, and you do see that in some of the new generation, but until there's an alternative, maybe there's a market for companies who inherently go stateless. They track as little as possible, essentially Tor, but for various apps. There
an
might be something
obfuscation
there.
company. That's it. A company that'll obfuscate the way I advocate.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, we managed to live. I can remember those days before we could just call up Google and see what the traffic was like. And somehow or other, we managed to live in those days. And, who wants to go back to those days? Anybody I see? One hand's two.
For a few hours per day, maybe.
And we've solved a lot of these problems. Like for a while, having user profile data was important for us to understand an evolving problem pattern. But now that we understand ride sharing, how much extra data do we really need about someone to design that effectively?
A friend of mine who used to work for Uber told me that they can tell which of their users are prostitutes. Because they always get picked up at nice apartments and go to the best hotels and at about 10 o'clock on Saturday night and come home at 2 or 3 in the morning, for example. And it's fairly easy to pick out, yeah. and I wonder what kind of marketing they will get.
Okay, here's one I'd like to get Cheryl's feedback on first. So maybe a month back or so, Google demonstrated this new technology that they developed, I believe, Duplex, they call it. So basically, they built like a sort of automated voice assistant for you that kind of, it's able to book like haircut appointments for you and all that stuff. And I mean, I'm not much of a salon type of guy, but I think that it probably will have some interesting applications in some other areas as well. So do you think that if this sort of technology goes mainstream, we could have serious issues with users' privacy? I mean, obviously you as the user give consent to Google Duplex or whatever it's called to actually call someone, but that other someone at the other end of the line never gave consent.
Correct.
Whether his voice parsed in some data center underwater or whatever they do nowadays. So what do you think?
That was my biggest issue with the duplex demo, was that there was no discussion about the consent on the other side of the line. And certainly the customers who are engaging with duplex and asking it to go know that they're engaging with AI. But for me, especially when it comes to conversational AI, right now, it's cloud-based technology, natural language processing, so anybody on the receiving end is being recorded, is being processed, probably in a cloud data center, probably logged and reviewed by humans, especially in beta. I should get to opt into that. And it should introduce itself, and they sort of corrected themselves after the fact, but I was less concerned with, I'm forgetting how to pronounce it, but there was a chatbot that Microsoft released in China, which starts out, I forget if it was on WeChat, but it was essentially you conversationally chatted with it and asked it to call you to continue the conversation.
Oh, okay.
The consent loop is closed there. I asked it to call me, it calls me. And I understand duplex's value when it's about booking an appointment. We talked about inclusivity a bit during my talk. There are folks for whom conversations with humans are difficult, whether they're on the autistic spectrum or they have a speech impediment, and those people might not book services otherwise. So you can make a value proposition to the salon owner.
Absolutely.
And say like, hey, we're helping you get business. One of the other use cases they mentioned was like calling to get hours. That feels like Google making money off of information my business has and not getting my consent to deal with AI. So I think every conversational AI should self-identify as such, maybe not in 6 sentences, maybe we need a pattern for that, and should allow me to opt out, even if that just means hanging up the phone, if I didn't initiate the conversation to begin with.
Joe, what do you think about it?
I don't know, I'm an API guy. I wish it was all just APIs and we didn't even take the humans out of the whole thing, but yeah, I don't know. It's a little. I agree with Cheryl that the consent on the other side is really a challenge that we need to work past.
We already have that. Get so many junk calls that we just don't answer. We look at the caller ID, and we just don't answer the phone if it's not somebody we know.
I don't even look at it.
Leave a damn message.
Yeah.
So I don't know about the state, but actually in Greece you can phone your telco provider and say, I don't want those calls anymore, and they basically just cut them out.
You can do that in the States, but the calls originated outside the States.
Oh,
and so
another dark pattern.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people think that data mining and big data are on an absolutely direct class with privacy. Joe, what are your thoughts about that?
What's the question?
Many people think that the industry fields of data mining and big data and all sorts of things are actually in direct class So they're colliding with online privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you can anonymize it or obfuscate it, then there's a lot of value in there, of course, with, research and what have you. Some of that I'd be willing to give up, even, perhaps health data, if it were truly anonymous, which I don't know if it actually can be, for the betterment of society. But I don't trust anyone anymore, so it's hard to think that we can get there.
If I recall correctly, I was just talking to a guy from Microsoft who does medical kinds of things, and he was saying that St. Jude Hospital for Children had just opened up this huge database of things to anybody who wanted to, so they could try to figure out medical kinds of things, because it had been completely de-identified, and therefore was sort of like you were saying with the Mozilla, the giant voice database. Well, there you go. Of course, using big data, well, you get that classic thing about Target matching the baby gift and identifying customers who were pregnant before they even knew it. But that's well.
And that's the tough part. I think there's been some good guidance around GDPR and separating the the personal identifying information from the information that can be more easily aggregated and anonymized. There is still a problem where sometimes we don't realize that a certain fingerprint of data can turn out to be PII. Exactly. Yep. And that kind of goes to being able to adapt over time. The minute you realize that you can reverse engineer who someone is without their name and their address and their zip code, then you probably have to change your data model. But I think smart engineering can get there, but it is a hard problem.
For sure.
I see, as long as people feel that they receive a benefit, like getting coupons to their favorite store, cents off, dollars off that nobody else gets, finding out where the traffic jams are, finding out how busy it is at a certain restaurant, whenever, stuff like that. They're going to keep doing it because who here has gotten bitten by that? Something bad happened to you because Google was keeping track of where you were. See? And what can I say?
I will say transparency is another important part of this, because right now we don't tell it. The best systems tell me why a recommendation was made. Like, this piece of data led to this recommendation. So if I don't like the fact that it gave a hemorrhoid cream recommendation, then you can say, well, don't track that piece of data. But right now, really, the only recourse
you're not the one with a sore butt.
But if I did, if you don't tell me how you came to a conclusion, my only recourse as a customer is to remove myself completely from your database. So anybody who's in the market of doing big data should be incentivized to be more transparent and help me understand which pieces of data are leading to undesired consequences.
You want to hear the ultimate cynical response? And that is, certainly to have these fine-grained controls so that people who care greatly the way you care greatly can remove those pieces that they think to have. And that will take your anger and energy that would be otherwise directed at these bigger guys and allow it to dissipate, and allow these sheep to keep on being sheep.
That's fair. I mean, I think I sometimes complain about the IT industry relying too much on complicated settings, so I think that's a fair response to that, and we should challenge everything about how we track customers. Mm-hmm.
So this year was pretty interesting because we had a privacy scandal that we've never seen before, and of course I'm referring to Cambridge Analytica, right? And that actually got, all good Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of the US Congress, which actually that particular testimony penetrated a lot of the general public, right? I mean, even my mom pretty much watched a few bits of that testimony.
Didn't you like seeing them sweat and squirm? I sure did.
Just to give you an idea, my mom is the kind of person that thinks that email addresses start with 3 W's. But she did watch some bits and pieces of that testimony. Joe, did you?
I didn't actually watch it.
You didn't, Cheryl?
I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched excerpts.
Okay. You watched or not?
Did watch some.
Okay. Thoughts?
I was concerned. I was glad that the congressman seemed a bit more educated the second day, but I was very concerned with the state of our union and technical legislation after what happened on the first day.
As I said earlier about whoever bribes them the most.
David, did you?
I watched a little because I did enjoy
I mean,
seeing
did you
him
follow the
squirm.
story a little bit?
No, I did not follow the story.
Okay.
And my question would be, who here has been harmed by that? Cambridge Analytica got some data that they weren't supposed to have. Who has been harmed? Exactly. How did it hurt you, sir? Not a bit. Or you?
Yeah. Did
I don't
it
wanna
help Trump
answer
get
that.
elected? And
Did
if
it
so,
help
then
Trump
there's
get
a lot.
elected?
I don't want to take position on that one, but maybe we can ask
When
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary would not set foot in the state of Wisconsin even once, I have a hard time. Sorry.
Do you want me to send that question over to Hillary Clinton, maybe, and have that answer that question?
Well,
for you?
and when you do that, ask her why she didn't set foot in the swing state of Wisconsin even once. So you send that along and read us both answers, okay?
Okay, all right. So I think I've left the most difficult one for the end, okay? And I want all of you three, starting with Dave, to react with one word, exactly one word. And I'm telling you to this because you usually use many words.
What?
One word, gesture or facial expression reacting to the following. Are you ready? Reacting to the following. GDPR.
Bullshit.
Joe?
Meh.
Cheryl? Developers? Okay.
All over the map.
All
Let's
right.
see. How many agree with me? All right. How many agree with Joe? How many agree with Cheryl? What can I say?
all right.
Thirds.
Okay, we're pretty much done. I think that was a cool discussion. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that
Thank
was
you.
great.
Happy to.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I certainly did enjoy it, and hopefully you did as well. We deeply thank you for being with us in that panel and discuss that particular subject of online privacy. So guys, please, a warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Great questions.
Thank you, sir.